All right, people, welcome back to MMA With Avinash. Today we have a very special guest, our Australian fellow, Quillan Salkilld. He is going to be fighting Anshul Jubli on 9th of February at UFC 312 in Australia, in Sydney. So I tried to, get in touch with him, and he was very kind enough to, get into this interaction with us. We'll be asking some questions around that fight, but first, welcome, Quillan Salkilld. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel. And the first question that I would like to ask you, let's just, I know that fight is very important and the time is very crucial, but let's just go a little bit in the history. Let's go back a little bit and talk about how the childhood of yours has been and how did you get into MMA. We know that there is a lot going on in terms of cricket, in terms of hockey. Australia is one of the, superpowers in terms of sport. So how did you quit all that and get into MMA? First of all, let's just try to understand that.
Well, I was playing Aussie rules football. That was my original dream. I'm from a small town in the top of my state, WA, and I moved down to Perth, the city, to pursue Aussie rules footy. And when I was down here, we also had the first ever UFC event in Perth, and I went to that, and I was a fan of the sport, and I was just so intrigued by it. And shortly after, I started training. And I just fell in love with the sport and become obsessed with it. And then over a matter of probably 3-4 months, I lost total interest in footy. And I just wanted to play, or not wanted to play, I wanted to pursue MMA as a career. Literally in that short of a time. It was just a total switch.
I get it. I mean, MMA has that. I mean, I've seen and heard a lot of interactions from the fighters, and once you get into it, you just can't, go anywhere else. That's how MMA is.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of your interviews with other people, and I see that you are getting a lot of DMs and a lot of attention from Indian fans.
Yeah,
I know it must have been pretty difficult and very challenging for you. But see, that's how, I mean, Indian mentality, we get attached to everything. That's how we are. I mean, we get very emotional when it comes to, especially when it comes to combat sport. So, on behalf of all of them, all I want to say is that we do have a lot of respect. We do have a lot of appreciation for even the opponents and everyone. That's how we think about it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come across to you.
Good messages, bad messages. I like the passion behind it. I've had some good back and forth with a few good banter, as we like to call it, bit of back and forth, and nothing. I don't take anything too seriously, even if it's if it's a bad message. It's at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I do appreciate all the all the kind messages coming out of all the Indian MMA fans. I do really appreciate it. I get quite a few of them, probably more than bad ones, more kind ones.
That's really good to know. And I saw that you've been really respectful when it comes to showing your interactions about Anshul Jubli and this fight. And I think that, and I wanted to ask you this question as well. So when it comes to mixed martial arts or martial arts in general, ever since the evolution of martial arts, respect and appreciation for the opponent has been a major factor. They understand what kind of mental and physical challenges every fighter has to go through just to reach to that stage, in particularly in UFC. Like, you go through weight cut, that itself is a huge challenge for the fighters, and you go to a lot of media obligations and everything. So I want you to talk to us about what is your opinion about the respect and appreciation aspect of the fighters when it comes to the combat sports in general.
Well, especially at this stage now, in the UFC, I know how hard and how how dedicated you have to be to get to this level. So
right.
I don't think there's going to be any easy fights in the UFC. No matter some people say, I've heard people say some fighters, they just fight bums to get up the rankings, but I kind of don't believe that. I believe every fighter on the UFC roster is a hard challenge to overcome. So especially at this level, I have respect for whoever's name gets brought up to me. Then the UFC, I know how hard it is to get to this level. So everyone on the roster has my respect.
That's a great attitude to have, bro. Okay, and the next question is how is there any fighter in history, like in Australian history or in UFC, that inspire you to pick up MMA? And is there someone who really clicked it to you and you started watching their fights while growing up?
I was never a fan of MMA. I didn't even know what it was until I was probably like 17, until like literally just before I started training. I never knew about it. My friend at school brought it up to me. I remember I went over to his place one time after school, and he was showing me the UFC2 game. All right, so he introduced me to the game, and then he was showing me Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. So they were like the first iterations of MMA that I got brought up, and I was just playing the game. That's how I become a fan of the sport, was by playing on Xbox, playing UFC 2, and obviously on the front was Conor McGregor. So he was like my first like inspiration, for the sport. And then when I found out about obviously like Robert Whittaker and Jake Matthews at the time were like probably the biggest stars coming out of Australia in MMA, they were my
initial inspiration.
They were my like inspirations of like, and some people to support actually in the UFC as well.
Yeah. And I see that quite a journey you have had. Like you say that you started it at the age of 17, and I think you are 25 now.
Yeah.
So 8 years. I mean, if you didn't know anything about MMA and you started at 17, it's a phenomenal journey that you have had, bro. I mean, you have been eternal MMA champion. You defended your belt 2 times, and you got the call from Dana White Contender Series. And I saw all these fights. I mean, I've been watching ever since the fight was announced with Anshul. Honestly speaking, I started watching your fights after the fight was announced. I got to know about you, and the fights have been quite amazing. The kind of skill set that you have already, I mean, it's quite impressive, and I would be really excited to see you rise up the ladder in the UFC going forward, brother. We wish you good luck for that. All right, so moving on. So you had quite impressive a run as an amateur, and then you turned pro in 2021, and you are riding on a 7-fight win streak. Talk to me about what shifts in you, what kind of mentality change happens when you turn pro, and what kind of mentality in terms of mentality and mindset, what kind of change happens when you turn pro from an amateur fighter?
For me, I've always had, even as an amateur, I've always had like the same goal and the same vision of rising up the ranks and getting to the UFC. So the only change I had to make was just adjusting to the rule set and the time. So obviously changing from 3-minute rounds to 5-minute rounds and being able to use elbows. That was the only change I underwent. Probably since my 3rd amateur fight, that's when I really knew I wanted to actually do this as a career. Like when I first got into it, I wanted to just test myself, test my mettle, and just like a rite of passage. I wanted to do just as a form of like competition. I wanted one form of combat, in a controlled environment. I thought that was like a really cool thing to do. And then shortly after, I was like, this is what I'm going to do forever now. I like made that decision. And that's the end of it. I've always kept everything the same since my amateur career throughout the pros. It's just the same mindset going into every fight.
Got it. So now that you have turned pro and now you are going to make your UFC debut, I'm sure that with great achievements come great amount of attention and distractions as well. So I want you to talk a little bit about how do you manage the distractions that come along with the fame and attention you get across the world, and how do you make sure that you are still focused on the things that you did and the things that brought you all this attention and distractions?
Yeah, with the distractions, there's not so much of it going on. Like for me, like obviously I just got into the UFC. Like I'm not like a superstar, obviously yet. I imagine on the opposite side, obviously with Anshul, I've seen he's got a lot of fame, a lot of attention. I imagine for him it'd be a lot harder. For me, it's I just do my same old routine every day. Just living like the fighter lifestyle. I've gotten like a little bit more attention since like the Contender Series fight. I imagine it's going to grow, and they're the challenges I'm going to have to deal with later on. But for the time being, I can't really speak on that because there's not so much distractions going on at the moment.
That's a great thing to.
Yeah.
So
not so much. Yeah, there's a few of us on the roster, and I haven't got that sort of attention yet.
So if we talk about Australian MMA, I'm sure that MMA is not something very new, and I made a video about your skill set and everything. I described your skill set and everything in detail in one of my videos. Recently, I posted it on my YouTube channel. So I discussed this fact in there that MMA is not something very new for Australia or the oceanic region. It's been there for a long time. And if we talk about India, I think it came back very late. And ever since Anshul made it to the UFC, the things have taken a lot of hype and things are going pretty well for the MMA fighters in India right now. So if we talk about the evolution of MMA, I mean, we have seen Alexander Volkanovski already one of the greatest fighters in the featherweight division in UFC. Then you have Jack Della Maddalena. I'm sure that he's going to do pretty well in the upcoming fight against the English champion, Leon Edwards. And then you see someone like, if we talk about the middleweight division, we also have had a dominant champion. So if we talk about how the things have evolved and how you see yourself as coming up as one of the greatest lightweights currently in Australia, how do you see it going forward in UFC and currently how things are playing out for you?
So was it how I see things like progressing in terms of like the national sport like rising?
Yeah.
Like, I just think like when every like guy that I've fought rising up through the ranks, I've found that like even in the amateurs, like everyone's kind of had that goal to get to the UFC. Like especially throughout the pros, I don't think I've fought anyone like within the last like 5-6 fights that haven't had the aspirations to make it to the next level. So I think that just makes, obviously everything much more competitive. Like no one wants to do this sport just for fun or like as a hobby. Everyone takes it, very seriously.
Yeah.
And, I found in terms of like our region getting a lot of like knowledge and what do you call it, like coaching, we get a lot of that like outsourced from, international. Like my coach is from England, his coach was from, the States, and I always hear all these different coaches from like international. Everyone's obviously coming here, they come into Australia to live, and then obviously sharing their knowledge throughout, and then it becomes part of us, and then we get that knowledge to pass on, and then we get our own rise.
Yeah, I was watching one of the videos on YouTube and I got to know that your coach has got a very inspiring story behind him as well. I mean, the kind of journey he has had in his life, it's pretty inspiring. And I'm sure that in one of my videos going forward, I'll definitely love to talk about that as well, because it's phenomenal. And then to see that kind of a person coming off of that kind of a background and that kind of a difficult journey, it's very pleasing and very, I was really impressed to see that the kind of journey he has had. So, Quillan, it's time for the big question. I'm sure that many of the viewers must be waiting for this question. Right, you are going to have a fight on 9th of February this month, the next month, and you are going to have it against one of the best MMA fighters from India, Anshul Jubli. He's one of the best prospects that we have. Talk to me about what's the mindset going into this fight, and how do you think this fight is going to play out?
Yeah, I think he has a very dangerous skill set everywhere. Like, there's no like really weak points to his overall game in terms of like skills. Like his striking's good, his grappling's good. I just think my type of like pressure is going to start to say like overwhelm, or I'm going to start building as the fight goes on. He tends to start really strong and fade a bit as the fight goes on, where I'm kind of like the opposite, where I'll start all right, but as the fight goes, I build. So it's going to start like this, and then we're going to reach a middle point, and then I think I'm going to start overtaking as the rounds go on, and it's just going to see who can implement, their game plan.
That's
the
right.
best. Like if he starts off really strong, that's going to be the best for him. But the longer the fight goes, the more it's going to turn out into my favor, especially when we start grappling and when all those wrestling exchanges. I think I'm going to have the better gas tank when it comes to the grappling stuff, especially.
And that would be really interesting to see, because the long gap that he has taken after the last fight, I think that we hope that he has done a lot of work in terms of his cardio and conditioning. So it will be really interesting to see how this fight goes on, because it's, first of all, it's a debut for you, and the debut is happening in front of your home crowd. So I'm sure that
Yes.
the pressure is on both the fighters, like on you as well as on Anshul, because he's
Yeah.
coming off of a loss, and you are going to debut in front of your home crowd. So I'm sure that the build-up is pretty good. And trust me, Quillan, when I said this to you, that probably this fight, the viewership this fight is gonna get, it's probably top the main event of that fight card. That I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
Because Indian fans are crazy about this fight. They're waiting. They've been waiting for this fight for a really long time.
Yeah, it's good. Very, very passionate, like supporters. It's good.
Yeah.
Even if I was to go out and get like, I love the cheers, but also I like passionate sports. Even if I was to go out and get like booed, which fortunately I've never had. I've never gone out and be booed. But I've
Right.
gone out to fight and had no one say anything. Like interstate, when I've gone to a different state to fight someone else from their state, and when I get called out, I don't get booed. Sometimes I just get like no one, just get like the polite clap, and it's like silent. That's the worst. I'd rather the crowd either cheering for me or going nuts against me. I think I like that emotion behind it, the passion.
Oh, and you have to get used to it, right? It's not that if you rise up the ladder, it won't be possible for you to keep fighting in Australia. You will, at the end of the day, you will have to have that kind of mindset that it's okay. The fans are there, the passion is there. They'll start booing, they'll start cheering for you. So we have to get used to it at the end of the day, because you have to fight in US, then you will have to fight in London, multiple locations. So you won't have that home crowd support all the time. So we are rooting for I mean, personally, I'm a fan of the sport. I love the athletes. It has always been a dream of mine to interact as much as possible with the fighters that perform at that kind of level. So it was a really huge opportunity and pleasure for me to be able to interact with you. I'm trying to get in touch with Anshul's team as well. If they're open to come down for an interview on this channel, I'll definitely do that. But I really appreciated, Quillan. It was a really pleasure to speak to you, and especially when the time is so tough that you are going through a lot of, you must be cutting weight and going through a lot right now. So we really appreciate it. One last question before I let you go is how does a typical how does a typical day look like for a pro fighter who is going through a fight camp? What's the daily routine? How things go around on a fighter's life during a fight camp?
Yeah. Routine during fight camp is very boring. We wake up, other than eat, train, sleep, and that's pretty much it. Training like twice a day on most days. The only places we go is from home to the gym, back home, then to the gym. It's a very boring like lifestyle during camp, although very hard because we have to go to the gym, push our bodies, to the extremes, then come and rest, and then go again. It's probably more interesting. It's very much more interesting in the when there's no fights coming up, when your schedule's a little bit more
Right.
free. But at the end of the day, we love it, and it's it's worth it. It's worth that. To us, it's not boring. Just on an outside perspective, like
it has a lot of beautiful outcomes.
Yeah, like that's where all my friends are at the gym. It's not just going there to train. It's like you get to socially interact with your some of your best mates, and then come back home, rest, eat, and then go do it again. We love it, but on the outside perspective, just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, yeah, I see how it is boring. Yeah. Yeah.
So we do appreciate you coming on this channel, and I look forward to another conversation after the 5 days over. Let's see if we can make it happen. And then it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the channel and sharing your views on this, Quillan. Great to have you on the channel. Thank you so much for joining.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having
Good
me
luck
on.
for the
Appreciate
fight.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
have
you.
a good one. Bye.
Bye. Beautiful. All right. See you, mate.
Yeah.